Addy had he described his friendship with Gaia a little bit more. He had also explained his life living in the tower block and how his mum wasn't very well, that she seemed to have depression. And he'd also just recently explained about how the pub down the road from him had fallen down with these vines that had been growing over them. So we're going to start with chapter 6 today. I didn't give up trying to talk Mum into getting help. The next day she was up and tried to give me a shopping list, but I wouldn't take it unless she came with me. Come on, Addy, she said when I refused to put out my hand for the fluttering piece of paper. The bread's gone green. You don't want to eat green bread, do you? I know I don't. Why don't we go together and we could go to the doctor's afterwards, I asked. Mum didn't say anything. She just started taking little gasps of air and tried not to look at me. But she did catch my eye as she took those little painful breaths. In that tiny moment, I could tell she was blaming me for making her breathe like that because I'd asked her to go with me. I snatched the list from her hand and ran out of the flat and down in the lift and across the road to get the food. It was only when I'd gotten all the way to the shop that I realised I'd forgotten to bring any money with me. I'm sorry, Addy, Mum said as soon as I came back in. She was still standing in exactly the same position as when I'd left, as if she'd been frozen the whole time I was away. I know this can't be fun for you. I didn't say anything, but just reached out up to the jam jar where we kept our money and took out a £5 note that had been folded tightly in half again and again until it was only a little square. I couldn't look Mum in the eye. I felt like I'd failed her, and it was an unbearable feeling, a pressure that settled over my chest and wouldn't let up. Let's go together. It's a good idea, she said. I looked up at her sharply. She looked like she might start crying, but she was also nodding a little, as if to say, yes, I can do this. Are you sure, Mum? I couldn't believe it. I felt too glad even to smile. Mum gave me another of her funny nods. She stood up a little unsteadily, and holding my hand, she walked towards the front door. Every step was an effort, and I was reminded of the way a snail moves, those tiny movements propelling it forward bit by bit. I felt so happy as she took those few shuffling steps past our front door, but also daunted by the task that lay ahead. The shops and the doctor's surgery seemed very far away. It was as if we'd just begun to climb a mountain and we couldn't see the top because it was surrounded by thick white clouds. We'd made it as far as the lift when she started doing the funny breathing again. Her hand tightened round mine, and I tried to give her a reassuring squeeze, but I don't think she felt it. She was holding on so tightly. I can't do it, Addy. I'm sorry, I can't. As she turned back to our flat, her eyes met mine for the briefest moment, and again they seemed to say, don't make me do this. This is hurting me. And just like that, I was standing on my own in the corridor with the sound of our front door slamming echoing in the emptiness. I did the shopping and I almost made it home without crying, apart from when the woman in the shop put a lollipop in my bag, along with the bread and milk, and said, looks like you need one, love. Thank you, I said. You're welcome, honey, she said, and I shocked myself with my eyes filled with tears. I quickly ran out, leaving the whole £5 note on the counter without waiting for my change, just so I wouldn't have to talk to the kind woman anymore. I walked past the old pub that had fallen down. It was a pile of bricks, but I could just about make out the sign that was sticking out of the bricks. It had a picture of a man's face on it. I'd forgotten that had even happened. I'd been so worried about Mum. When I finally got home, Mum was back in bed. I didn't go in to check on her. I wanted to believe that she was sleeping, not lying awake in the dark, waiting for the morning to come. I knew what I needed to do to make it easier for Mum, so I went back to doing all the things I did before. Before I tried to make Mum come outside with me, I got really good at being quiet when I arrived home from school so I didn't wake her. I called it the silence game. I had all sorts of tactics. One of the things I did was leave the hat off our whistling kettle when I boiled water for tea. Another was tiptoeing around the flat as quietly as I could, before I realised that I made a lot less noise if I just walked very carefully and slowly and spread my weight over the soles of my feet. That way I could stop any floorboards creaking. I also made sure that I didn't flush the toilet after I'd used it. I know that sounds a little bit disgusting, but I just put the lid down straight away and it wasn't too bad. Then Mum flushed it when she got up. Sometimes I would get a surprise and find something lying around that meant Mum must have left the flat that day. It didn't happen often, but enough to make me excited every day that I might find a clue that she had managed to go outside. Once it was just that her shoes were a little bit wet on their soles. I used to check the bottoms of her shoes every day, you see. Sometimes it was something that was left out that had not been there before. You would not believe how happy I felt when a single orange appeared on our sofa one day, or how fantastically pleased I was when I found a newspaper sitting on the kitchen table. The time gaps in between finding things like that were getting longer and longer, but it still gave me a lot of hope. Then there were the freshest few days when Mum would really surprise me. She would be awake when I came home from school. Sometimes she'd even washed her face and put lipstick on. Then she would blow me away by casually producing something that hadn't come from any of my shopping trips, and that she couldn't even have brought from one of the shops close to the flat. The day she presented me with a bowl of chocolate ice cream set my mind racing. I knew she must have gone to the supermarket because it was the only place you'd get this particular flavour, which are bits of chocolate brownie and swirls of caramel in it. It was our favourite. Before Mum got hurt, we used to eat it all the time. Too much of the time, Mum would laugh in the old days before patting the rounds of our bellies. She could have quite easily just bought some chocolates or sweets from the nearby newsagents, but she hadn't. She walked right past it and gone all the way down the road to buy our favourite chocolate ice cream. Chocolate ice cream for me. The chocolate ice cream said, "I'm getting better, Addie, I really am. And you know what? It tastes all the better because of it." There were no signs that she had left the flat the day after she tried to come shopping with me. Everything was left untouched and silent when I got home that night. I started playing the silence game and slowly walked over to the window ledge. I didn't make a sound. I looked down on the city below me and found the spot where the old pub had fallen down. I might only be saying this because I know what's happened since, but I thought I did notice some things were a little bit odd about that mound of rubble. Looking at it from my window, I thought I could see a faint blue tinge in the space where it once stood, and it was strange that there was so little of it left too. Not really what you'd expect from a big, tall building. I remember thinking that someone must have already started clearing it away, and that the blue tinge was just a trick of the light. I didn't know at the time that these were all important details. I did put the pub into my scrapbook though. I drew a picture of what it used to look like and what it looked like now it had fallen down. I wrote down the name as well. It was called the George. During the last school holidays, Miss Farraway had given each of us a large green scrapbook to draw or write about things that we saw around us. "Anything?" I'd asked her. "Anything that you see that is interesting, Addie," she said. "Or you can stick things in, if you find something you like the look of." She called them our spy books. I hadn't filled mine up much so far. I'd only stuck in a bit of a Happy Meal box that I'd had once and drawn the buildings I could see from my window. It was hard to draw the straight lines of towers though. They always came out wobbly. Now I'd drawn the pub too. How was I to know that this was only the beginning?